One of the biggest questions surrounding the Mariners all offseason has been who would be that third high leverage arm to go with Matt Brash and Andres Munoz in the back of the bullpen. Well, it seems we finally have our answer as the Mariners have traded for one of the most electric arms in baseball, Gregory Santos. I'll tell you about him coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Saturday, February 3rd, 2024. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 winning bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's LOCKEDON to get yourself started. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. So a very busy week for the Seattle Mariners has gotten even busier. Just when you thought they might be done with the offseason as a whole, here comes another big trade. Gregory Santos, right-handed reliever from the Chicago White Sox, is now a Seattle Mariner. Zach DeLoach and Prelander Berroa and the Mariners' competitive balance round B selection in this summer's draft heading to Chicago. And Colby, I found out about this deal because you called me on my phone, which you have literally never done. I was deep in playing Persona 3. I was having a burrito bowl, enjoying my Saturday. And as soon as I saw your name pop up on my phone, I knew this was going to be something wild. And it certainly lived up to the hype. So the Mariners, like I said in the cold open, seem to finally have that third high leverage guy. What do you think?
Yes, well, the reason I called you is because this is proof that Jerry and Justin clearly listened to the show.
Yeah.
Because I have been talking about, in light of the Mariners not likely being able to get an elite bat, maybe they should just swing the other direction and go build what on this show I have to call the screw you bullpen. Members of our Patreon know that I call it something else. And so proof, apparently they had the same idea. And they get a very good arm in Gregory Santos. You look at his StatCast page, it's a lot of red, and it's a lot of red in the places that matter. You're talking about, oh, there you go. 89th percentile in xERA, 98th percentile in fastball velo, 91st percentile in chase, 77th in whiff, 85th in base on ball. That's a big one. 100th percentile in barrel percentage, 1.5% barrel rate, 78th percentile in hard hit, 87th percentile in ground ball. Like, this is a guy who is very hard to square up. When you do, you're going to hit it on the ground, which limits damage, and he's not going to walk you. At least that is what his profile from last year tells us. It's 98 to 103 with a with a running fastball and one of the best sliders in all of baseball. Breaking ball run value, 98th percentile.
Yeah, he had the second most valuable slider in all of baseball this past year.
This is a guy, and there's still more to get because he doesn't strike out a tremendous amount of guys, and the stuff suggests that he should. So I think the Mariners could even get a little bit more out of Santos. And here's kind of the beauty of it. You get this guy for 5 years.
Yeah.
This isn't a 2-year rental. This isn't, this is a guy who's making league minimum. You're going to get him for 5 more years. And you have built a bullpen that is on par with the best bullpens in baseball and might be the best bullpen in baseball because you're adding Santos to Matt Brash and Andres Munoz, both of whom still have another year to go as well. There's a possibility that you have the best 1-2-3 punch in the back end of your bullpen in all of baseball, and you built it, relatively speaking, on the cheap. None of these guys are making huge amount of money. The Mariners' payroll actually stays roughly the same.
They actually technically dumped payroll in this deal because they traded 240. They traded 2 40-man guys for one, but yeah.
Right. It's prorated. So like DeLoach, if he's not on the active roster, blah, blah, blah. But you guys get the point. Anyways, they didn't add money in this deal, which again, unfortunately, we do have to point out every time it happens. But hey, you know what? We're here to talk about Gregory Santos today. We're here to talk about how much better the Mariners are. And remember back on Mailbag, I guess technically Wednesday now.
Yeah.
Our biggest question, our biggest topic of conversation is: are the Mariners? Did they catch the Astros? Did they catch the Rangers? Yes, they have caught them. They have passed them.
Wow.
This is a team that has the best rotation in baseball in the American League West. It now has the best bullpen in the American League West. They've essentially turned these games into 6-inning games, which very few teams can do. And if you don't get on that starter, if you don't jump on that starter early, by the way, the starters we're talking about, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Luis Castillo, all Cy Young contenders.
Yeah.
And then you have the huge upsides of Bryce Miller and Brian Wu. Good luck. Good luck scoring runs against this Mariners team. So, and that's not even counting the middle guys in the bullpen, which pretty good, not awful. So the Mariners,
and we've heard Jerry consider Gabe Spire to be a part of that high leverage group.
Sure.
Taylor Saucedo, who you guys are going to hear from on Tuesday, said that if there's anyone we're sleeping on in the bullpen, it's Spire. So you might have 4 guys, or at least the Mariners feel that they have 4 guys. And so you said that it might be 6-inning games. It might be 5-inning games from the Mariners' perspective here.
Right, and we're not even factoring in the high upside arm of somebody like Carlos Vargas, who definitely has the stuff to be.
Jackson Kowar, I got to mention him.
Sure, naturally.
Yeah.
And that's not counting,
and of course Sauce.
Sure. I mean, then you have the guys in the middle. You have Sauce, you have Thornton.
Yeah.
You have, probably Kowar, but you throw Crable, maybe a Butchery in there.
Respect Jackson Kowar.
Sure, always the changeup. But yes, the Mariners have built the screw you bullpen. To go along with their screw you pitching staff and a pretty good offense. So we're sitting here, we're talking about who's the favorite in the American League West. As things sit right now, it should be your Seattle Mariners. Yes, there's questions. Yes, there are health concerns with a lot of this roster. Things have to break right for you. But when you look at just talent, when you look at how you win baseball games, the Seattle Mariners are the class of the American League West right now. And considering what Jerry and Justin have had to deal with this entire winter, it is hats off to those guys yet again as they continue to not allow questionable ownership to be nice, to push them down when every other team in baseball, seemingly with payroll constrictions, major payroll restrictions, have basically just decided to run it back. Jerry and Justin have been aggressive. They've gone out. They've traded from their farm. They've traded from their major league roster. They've been open to anything and everything that can make this club better. And if there was ever a doubt in the mind of any of the players in the clubhouse about whether or not the front office believes in this group, they've been answered in spades this week. This is a group that this front office wants to invest in. I wish the ownership did too. But for now, the Mariners have arguably the best bullpen in baseball. They have the best rotation in this division at the very least. They have a good offense filled with a lot of guys who are very stable bets to produce. It's just going to come down to how healthy do they stay? How consistent can they be on a day in, day out basis? This is a good team. It's still a young team, and Jerry and Justin deserve a ton of credit, and Mariner fans should be absolutely psyched to get to watch Brash, Munoz, and Santos. Because keep in mind, we're thinking about them when they're all available. What happens when Brash isn't available for a day because he pitched 2 days before?
Okay,
that's okay.
Santos.
Yeah, that's okay. I got Santos now, and I got Munoz still. So this is
okay.
huge.
I got Gabe Spire. That's okay. I got Andres Munoz. Yeah.
Right. So this is huge. This is a massive deal, just in terms of what it brings in. Mariners had to give a little something to get, Santos, which you have to. That's how it works. Ty disagrees, but
I have some thoughts on that. Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. We'll get to that later. We'll get to that later.
Right. But Mariner fans should be absolutely psyched. This is pure filth coming out of the Mariners bullpen in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning. Good luck. You better have a lead when the Mariners hand things over to those 3 guys, because if you don't, it's probably not going to go well for you most nights.
Yeah. You're going to be channeling the Morgan Freeman in The Dark Knight. Good luck. This is going to be a nasty bullpen. And like we talked about on Wednesday, this pitching staff is the great equalizer. Yes, your offense isn't as good as the Rangers. It's not as good as the Astros.
Closer than people think, but yeah.
But can it be good enough to score enough runs to give you a shot any given night, especially when paired with this pitching staff? Absolutely. This bullpen is significantly better than the Rangers. The rotation is significantly better than the Rangers. It is better. The rotation is better, not as significantly, but still better than the Astros. And this bullpen, I think there can be, I think you can make a strong argument for the Astros top 3 guys over the Mariners top 3 guys, but I think this is a deeper bullpen. And I feel like the top 3 guys, the difference between those two groups is not large enough that I would give the advantage to the Mariners bullpen over the Astros as well. So, you know, as long as these guys can stay healthy, right? As long as the pitching staff stays healthy, which is obviously a massive question mark, always going to be a massive question mark. It's not really even about the player profiles or the history of the players. It's just you never know with pitchers, especially with guys like Santos, Brash, Munoz, all these guys who throw hard that put a lot of stress on their arms. But as long as they stay healthy, this is going to be a nightmare for opposing offenses to deal with on a night-to-night basis. And there are so many ways that Scott Service and company can deploy this bullpen. It is very, very exciting. Now, one thing we have to mention before we move on here is that Santos actually does come with a little bit of a health concern. He did finish the season on the injured list with right elbow inflammation. And Scott Merkin, who is the White Sox beat reporter for MLB.com, said back in December, Santos is working out in Arizona and has had good medical reports. The goal is to have him ready for the start of the season, but he just started his throwing program, so he might not be full go at the start of spring training. So we'll see, but I would assume that if the Mariners pulled the trigger on this deal, they feel pretty good about Santos being ready to go sooner rather than later, and they don't feel that there is really much of a concern there with the elbow. So we're going to talk more about the return, what the Mariners sent to Chicago in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I'm sure a lot of us Seahawks fans are going to be hate watching the 49ers and cheering on Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, but the only thing I would love more than seeing the 49ers go home crying is winning some cold, hard cash on FanDuel. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W, or 2, or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers can join today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen after the Gregory Santos trade. And as a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So before we talk about what the Mariners had to give up in this deal, I also want to focus on a really important aspect of this, is that this team really, really needed a third guy. You know, after trading Paul Sewald at the deadline last year, this bullpen just wasn't the same. How important from that perspective is adding Santos to the mix?
I think it's pretty important. It's funny, you know, I was speaking on a Slack channel today of other Mariner fans, and I said my only concern with the bullpen and just kind of building it as it was this morning is that when you inevitably need a guy in the middle of the year, it's going to be a lot more expensive to get him in season than it's going to be now. So I that was my concern, and then a couple hours later, so no longer much of a concern. So
Jerry and Justin are in the Slack, confirmed.
Maybe we know they listen to the show. That is a fact. We can prove it.
Right.
Obviously, everything about the Santos acquisition
Polanco,
is just my idea, like naturally.
Chills.
So
Chills. Yeah, Colby did it again.
Yeah, it's insane.
Right.
That's going on a t-shirt.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's huge because
Let
again,
us know in the comments below if you buy that t-shirt.
Sure. Because really, honestly, what Santos is at his worst is a jacked up Justin Topa. Like that's him at
Yeah.
his worst, and there's more to go get there. So I think, again, to me, a big part of this trade is the message that it sends into that clubhouse, where it's like, yes, I know that, there were some questions about our commitment to you guys last summer. And we know that, trading Seawald, well, ultimately it probably did help a little bit, just in terms of getting a second baseman who could actually play and,
Yeah.
getting something out of Canzone for a couple of weeks. While it ultimately did help, it's still a gut punch. And it's still like, hey, do these guys believe in us? No, there's no question about that now. Santos and Polanco are definitely moves you make when you think your team can, take that next step. And so,
well, and the other thing too, right, is like after the way that last offseason went, we heard Jerry and Justin talk on multiple occasions about how they misread the market. And it seemed like the messaging essentially there with them acknowledging that was, we are not going to let that happen again. And it took a while for them to get going this offseason, and for a while things looked really bad. But you look at what they've done over the last month-ish, it's been banger after banger after banger, and especially this week with swinging the deal for Polanco and now swinging this deal for Santos. These are real statements that this front office are making.
right. And we talked about this, when Jerry had his press conference. One of the things he said after the 54% fiasco, and Justin also alluded to this, is that, yeah, we thought we had a better handle on the market last year and it got away from us, and we can't do that again. And I think our sentiment was like, cool, it's good that you recognize that, but how do you, until you actually act on it, it's just
Right.
lip service to us, right?
Right.
The Mariners have acted on it, because we think about a week ago, we were talking about, it would be a nice cap on this roster, maybe somebody like Whit Merrifield. And instead they go out and they get 2 all-stars.
Right.
Put a cap. And by the way, they still have money to spend. They still have resources to
Yeah,
spend.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second.
They want to get another guy, they can.
Yeah,
But so yeah, it's talk is cheap, right? Especially for the Mariners. And that includes the talk from the front office, still includes the talk from the ownership. It includes Scott Service, and the players all have, well, not all of the players, but the players have voiced those concerns in the past. Talk is cheap. How, action is going to prove more than whatever your press conference will say. And what the front office has done, again, you have to separate the front office from the ownership group. They're not the same. What the front office has done has showed us and the players through their actions that they believe in this roster and that they think they are legitimate World Series contenders, and they've gone out and they've acted accordingly. That should be like, if you're if you're a Seattle Mariner, if you're Cal Raleigh, if you're Logan Gilbert, this offseason, you should look at this and be like, these guys are serious. They want to win.
Yeah.
So I think this move, just beyond what it brings to the bullpen, which is tremendous, is kind of a reinforcement of Jerry and Justin practicing what they preach a little bit, which is nice, because you're right. They totally butchered last offseason, and they said they were going to learn from their mistakes. We were all kind of like, we'll see. And then when the stuff about the money came out, we were even more like, probably not going to happen. And they've done it. And they've absolutely floored us with their ability to do it. And yeah, I would be very, very excited if I was Cal Raleigh, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Julio. I'd be jacked if I was playing for the Seattle Mariners this year.
We talked about this on CTZ, I believe, on Tuesday. I asked you the question, is this the best offseason in the Dipoto regime era? And I think we agreed that 2021 was probably the best overall, but I think we both agreed that this offseason is at least the most impressive by this front office. This took it over the top for me. This is the best offseason the Dipoto regime has had in Seattle. Full stop. No qualifier about the restrictions that have been put in place. I mean, that makes it all the more impressive for sure. The fact that they've done this in spite of their ownership group basically giving them zero support whatsoever. But this is insane. I'm stunned, and And the thing for me is really is that they just keep going, right? When again, like a week ago, we were talking about, maybe they'll add Tim Anderson or Whit Merrifield, and they're going to call it an off season. And it's like, okay, I feel pretty whelmed by that. I liked what they did on the day that they traded for Rayleigh and Haniger, but overall, meh. But now,
considering what they had to do, like what they had to work with, you probably would have been like,
I understand it. I understand it. But you bring in now Polanco, who was arguably the best second baseman available or feasibly available on this market. And now you bring in someone like Santos, who I didn't even think was going to be available in general to shore up the back end of your bullpen. I know you did. You called it your Nostradamus, blah, 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 blah.
Born on the same day, don't you know?
That's true. We did establish that on CTZ that one day.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could not be more impressed with what this front office has been able to accomplish. That does not absolve the organization as a whole for ownership's cheapness and some of the messaging at the beginning of the offseason, all that. It does not absolve that. But back when that happened, back when the 54% comment was made, I said the only way you can make up for this if you're Jerry Dipoto is to go kick this offseason's ass. And they kicked this offseason's ass. Like they did it
for Jerry.
They did it. Like they truly did it. So my hat's off to Jerry Dipoto, Justin Hollander, who we need to give a lot more credit than we probably do, and just the rest of that Mariners front office in general.
Yes, I've consciously been trying to say Jerry and Justin more.
Same.
Because Justin is more or less the day-to-day guy. Like obviously
he's doing the heavy lifting,
right? He's doing most of the negotiation. He's talking to most of the agents, and Jerry is kind of got his hands.
He's the directive. He's the yeah.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about what the Mariners gave up in this deal, Colby. It's Prelander Berroa, it's Zach DeLoach, and it's a competitive balance round B selection.
Yep.
I've seen a few people on Twitter say this feels like a lot, and I wholeheartedly disagree. I was waiting for more to get reported about this deal.
Harry Ford,
quite frankly. Yeah, I get there's like Santos has only done it for 1 year. There's obviously the elbow concern, but again, we're talking about one of the most electric arms in all of baseball for 5 years of that guy too. And I get the White Sox are in a very different place than the Mariners are right now, but I don't get it from the White Sox perspective. I don't. I see a lot of people that are like, I like this deal for both sides. I don't get it. Because from the Mariners perspective, what you gave up is basically a guy that you hope is Gregory Santos one day on the high end. A fourth, fifth outfielder type in Zach DeLoach. And a glorified third round draft pick in what is widely considered to be a very weak draft. There is nothing here the Mariners gave up that I'm losing sleep over. And I don't really get it from the White Sox point of view either.
Sure. The White Sox, I think, first of all, we'll start with the Mariners because that's what people care about here.
Yeah.
Fun note, Gregory Santos is 6 months older than Prelander Berroa.
Yeah. You gave up just 1 year of club control.
Yes. You gave up 1 year of club control. You gave up a fifth outfielder, more than likely, maybe a fourth outfielder. I think DeLoach is an interesting guy. I think he has a future in the big leagues.
He didn't have a path in Seattle, though.
No, he was behind Canzone. He's behind Rayleigh. He's behind, Haniger at this stage.
Possibly even behind Marlowe.
Yeah, definitely behind Marlowe. He's he might have been behind Trammell. And obviously he's behind other guys who can play out. He's behind Samad Taylor. He's behind, Dylan Moore. Like he had a very difficult path to get to the big leagues with Seattle. So he, I don't want to say he's nothing because I think he's a solid a top prospect, Zach DeLoach. Don't you know?
Right. Shout out to Savage Dipoto.
I think I had him like 24th in the Mariners prospect ranks.
Yeah.
Whatever. So Berroa is the key here. And actually, I think it's the draft pick. The Mariners, they lose the draft pick. Again, poor draft class. That's kind of the consensus right now. They lose a little bit of bonus pool money. It's about $1 million. So that might be the bigger hit than the actual pick itself.
Yeah.
And then they lose 6 years of Berroa, maybe 7, because if you keep Berroa back for a couple of weeks, then you get the extra year. So they may have lost 2 years of Berroa, but this is a deal that we saw. This is a jacked up version of a deal we saw a few years ago when they traded Seth Elledge for Sam Tuivailala. Basically, you trade the guy that you think could be the player that you're getting.
Right. And it's the whole, Gregory Santos is cool, but Prelander Berroa could be in anything, even Gregory Santos. It's that same thing that I've said multiple times on the show in the past.
Right.
It's just I don't see why anyone could be upset about that swap in particular.
Right.
Obviously, there's more to the deal outside of that, but when we just break it down to Berroa for Santos, I'm doing that not just 10 times out of 10, not just 11 times out of 10, 100 times out of 10. Like,
I thought you were going to go with 12.
12, sure.
In honor
Crank
of
it all, crank it all the way up to 12.
Yeah.
Shout out to Kurt Russell.
Great opening for the Super Bowl, by the way.
Yeah.
I still watch it sometimes. I miss those days. Anyways, Berroa.
The anniversary was yesterday, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I almost watched the game, but then I was like, nah, I have a life. Not really.
It would also make me very sad about Pete.
Anyway. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Just to look at all those guys, and be like, oh. Especially imagine watching Bobby Wagner 10 years ago versus the. Anyways, we're not locked on Seahawks, so
shout out to Corbin though.
Yes, absolutely. Berroa is probably more of a strikeout guy. Like he's going to be like a 12 K per 9 guy.
Yeah.
He also might be a 6.5 walk per 9 guy. Gregory Santos is a strike thrower.
Yeah.
So it's going to look a little different, but at the end of the day, I think Prelander ceiling is probably what Santos just did last year. It's about a win and a half reliever. And sure, is it possible that Berroa suddenly figures out how to throw strikes and he's just like this high leverage reliever for the next 6 years? Sure. Is it possible that Santos is just Justin Topa? Sure. All trades are wagers, but what you're betting on
Justin
is
Topa ain't throwing 103 though.
Right, but same result, right?
Yeah.
But that's the bet you're making, and the bet you're making is that Santos helps you more this year than Berroa would have, and I think that's a pretty safe bet. I like Berroa. I'm going to miss him. It would have been awesome to have him in this bullpen with Santos, but you have to give up something to get something, and the White Sox.
That's the only disappointing aspect of this deal is like of that swap is like, oh, well, I would prefer to have both in the bullpen.
Sure. You know what? You might have Berroa already in your system again. His name is Carlos Vargas. Like
his name is Jackson Coer.
Sure. There's a lot of similarities between those two arms, and it's funny. I was thinking about this on as I was frantically trying to get home. The Mariners in 3.5 years turned Donovan Walton and Zach DeLoach and a comp round B pick into Gregory Santos, one of the best relievers in baseball. Took some time. That's how baseball works, but
that's essentially what it was, though. Yeah.
That's basically at the end of it what it was, because you only got like an inning and a third from Berroa before you traded him. So,
well, and that's the other thing too, is like, had the Mariners soured on Prelander Berroa, because last year we talked about Berroa as if it was essentially a lock that he was going to be a pretty big part of that bullpen at some point in 2023, and then we only saw him twice. And obviously, he struggled to throw strikes down in Double-A, but that started to improve over the course of the year. But I wonder if they just kind of lost faith in his ability to do that consistently. I truly do wonder if something changed in the minds of the Mariners regarding Berroa and what they felt his ceiling was. Because if they think Berroa is just essentially another Gerson Bautista, Tiago Vieira, et cetera, guy that throws really hard but can't find the strike zone to save his life, if he's just one of those guys, then cool, great.
Sure. I mean, even if he is like an all-star level reliever, cool, great. He probably wasn't going to be this year. He probably wasn't going to be next year. So that's what you're buying. You're essentially accelerating Prelander Berroa's ceiling effect on your bullpen to this year instead of in a couple of years. From the White Sox perspective, I'm interested to see if they'll try and let him start. They really have no reason not to. So if they think that they can, help him become a starter, then this deal makes a lot more sense for them. But, either they see a lot in DeLoach. They think he can be an everyday guy. They think Berroa could start and has like the high leverage reliever thing as a fallback for them,
Mhm.
which, he did come up as a starter, so it is possible. And unless maybe they want that pick, not for the actual pick, but for the bonus pool money. So maybe they can kind of coax their player that they want down the board to them.
Yep.
So yeah, it's an interesting deal. There's virtually no downside for Seattle. Of course, every trade can end badly. Like you could trade,
Santos could stay hurt or get
sure.
hurt
I mean,
again,
you could have
whatever.
traded Caballero for Shohei Otani, and Otani could have, gone out for his career after his first at bat. That's still a good trade. It just you
Right.
lost it. Like
It's process over results.
right. And that's all you can really grade the front office on is, was it sound process? Were they wrong for the right reasons? Then it's fine.
Yeah. Did it make sense at the time?
Yes.
And at the time, yes, this makes
Absolutely does.
all the world of sense. And then some.
And
So
I was just gonna say, and I'd like to point out, there's no reason they have to be done.
that's right. That's right.
They still have, $5, $6, $7 million to play with.
We'll see.
They have an open 40-man spot.
Yeah, they do.
Unless
They
it
do.
goes to Kane and Smith and Jigba.
CSN.
That's right, baby.
All right.
Rise.
I hate you. All right. Santos this past year, I didn't read his stats at the beginning of the show, so we'll just quickly go over that. It was his first full season at the big league level, only had 5 appearances in the majors before last season. 66 in a third innings thrown, 3.39 ERA, 2.65 FIP. Just an 8.95 Ks per 9, which is kind of surprising considering how often he misses bats. 2.31 walks per 9, which is great, especially for someone that throws as hard as he does. Interesting enough, 52.5% ground ball rate, which is not typical for someone that throws that hard to keep the ball on the ground that much. So, yeah, it's a really interesting profile. The Mariners got better today, significantly so, because it answered one of the biggest question marks remaining on this roster. Now, again, there is a lot of health concerns, or there are a lot of health concerns on this roster. And that's obviously the biggest question mark that is going to be prevalent no matter what else they do this offseason. But damn, did they knock this offseason out of the park? Out of the frickin' park. Considering everything that's happened. Insane. All right, any closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Someday, I hope, beyond hope, that Jerry and Justin are not only allowed to cook, but they're allowed to do so with a budget that is indicative of their skills as baseball front office men. Because right now, from where I'm sitting, the only person preventing the Seattle Mariners from winning the World Series is Mr. John Stanton.
Chris
Larson, players. Too. Yep. It's not the players.
Ownership group.
It's not the front office. It's not the coaching staff. It's not the fans. That leaves one person.
Yep.
Figure it out.
All right. So, on that note, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Dane Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty Dane Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.